Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a stack of research that, I'll be honest, I thought I knew. I mean, we've all seen the movies.
Oh, yeah?
We've seen Ben-Hur, we've seen the gladiator epics. We think we know what a chariot race looks like.
Right.
But once you actually start digging into the primary sources, the archaeology, the economic records, you realize the Hollywood version is basically a tame, sanitized nursery rhyme compared to the reality.
It really is. When you peel back that cinematic layer, you're left with something that is arguably the most intense, violent, and socially critical phenomenon in the ancient
Well, it's
world.
not just a sport.
No, not at all. We are talking about an obsession that gripped Western civilization for over a millennium.
We're talking about a sport that was part Formula One, part gang warfare, and part religious revival. And the stakes. We aren't talking about a trophy. We are talking life, death, and money on a scale that actually rivals modern billionaires.
That's the part that always surprises people. The money. But also the sheer longevity. I mean, if we look at the timeline for today's deep dive, we are spanning nearly 2,000 years.
2,000 years.
From the heroic age of Homer's Greece in, say, the 8th century BC, through the industrial meat grinder of the Roman Empire, all the way to the political pressure cooker of the Byzantine Empire in the 12th century AD.
That is a staggering run. There is no modern sport that has that kind of continuity.
Not even close.
So our mission today is to unpack this obsession. We want to understand why men stood on these flimsy wooden carts behind 4 terrified horses, why emperors bankrupted treasuries to watch them, and how this sport grew powerful enough to literally overthrow governments.
And we need to get into the mechanics of it, too.
Oh.
Because it's not just men in carts. The engineering, the horse breeding, the physics of the crash, it's all incredibly sophisticated.
Absolutely. But before we get into the tech, let's set the scene. Because the numbers in these sources are hard to wrap your head around. I want you to close your eyes for a second. We are in Rome, the Circus Maximus.
Right, the Circus Maximus. In the valley between the Palatine and Aventine Hills. Now, modern stadiums are big. The Super Bowl might host, 70 or 80,000 people?
Right, a huge stadium.
The Circus Maximus, based on the archaeological footprint and the seating density, held an estimated 150,000 spectators.
150,000.
Some ancient sources claim 250,000, but even if we stick to the conservative 150,000, that is a sea of humanity.
150,000 people. And no PA system, no jumbotrons.
Just the roar. The sources describe the noise as a physical force, like thunder or an earthquake.
And the smell. I mean, you have to imagine the smell.
Oh, absolutely. You have 150,000 people packed in tight, sweating in the Italian sun. You have the smell of fried food from the vendors, the smell of wine. And down on the track, you have the smell of hundreds of horses, manure, sweat, and the iron tang of blood when things go wrong.
It's a sensory assault.
It is. And
Yeah.
visually, it's dust. When the race starts, usually 12 chariots, each with 4 horses, that is 48 horses, thundering down a dirt track.
So you can't even see anything.
The dust cloud would have been choking. If you were in the cheap seats, you probably couldn't even see the far turn. You just heard the crash and the scream of the crowd.
It sounds absolutely terrifying. And yet, this was the pinnacle of entertainment. But it didn't start that way. It didn't start as this mass market industrial spectacle. It started, surprisingly, at a funeral.
Yes, we have to go back to Greece, to the Iliads.
I was rereading book 23 of the Iliad for this, and I was struck by how different the vibe is compared to Rome. This is the funeral games for Patroclus, Achilles is hosting, and the people racing aren't slaves or professionals.
No, they're the kings, Diomedes, Menelaus, Antilochus. They're the heroes of the story. This is the heroic age ethos. The idea is our exlete excellence. Yeah, hero had to be excellent at everything. Fighting, speaking, and controlling horses. If you were a king, you drove your own chariot. You put your own body on the line to prove your status.
But looking at the text, it's not exactly a clean fight, is it? There's this moment with Antilochus, who is driving a slower team, where his father, Nestor, gives him advice.
Yes.
And this advice feels less like sportsmanship and more like win at any cost.
Nestor's speech is actually a brilliant piece of technical analysis.
Mm-hmm.
He explicitly tells Antilochus, your horses are slow, you cannot win on speed, you have to win on geometry.
On geometry.
He tells him to drive so close to the turning post, the terma, that the hub of his wheel literally grazes the stone.
Which sounds insane, because if you hit that stone...
You shatter the wheel, the chariot flips, and you probably die.
Yeah.
But Nestor's pointing out the physics of the race. The track is an oval. The inside line is significantly shorter. If you have the nerve to risk death by inches, You could beat a faster team that takes a wider, safer line.
And Antilochus listens. He drives like a maniac. He cuts off Menelaus, literally threatens to wreck them both if Menelaus doesn't back down.
It does.
It just destroys this idea of the gentleman amateur. These guys were ruthless.
They were. And look at the prizes. Diomedes wins first place. What does he get? He gets a woman skilled in fair handiwork and a bronze cauldron with handles.
Which is, well, from a modern perspective, receiving a human being as a trophy is horrific.
Go for it.
But in the context of the Bronze Age, this was about resource accumulation.
Exactly. A skilled slave and a massive amount of bronze represented tangible wealth and status. It wasn't just a gold medal to put on a shelf, it was capital.
But this dynamic, the king driving his own car, it doesn't last. By the time we get to the actual Olympics around 680 BC, the sport changes. The rich guys get out of the chariot.
This is the crucial pivot. As the sport became more organized and the chariots became lighter and faster, the danger just waved.
Yeah.
It increased exponentially. Right. Simultaneously, the aristocracy realized they could outsource the risk while keeping the glory. The Olympic rule was specific. The winner of the race is the owner of the team.
So the guy holding the reins, eating the dust, dodging the crashes, he's just an employee.
Often a hired professional or even a slave. He gets paid, sure. But the olive wreath, the statue at Olympia, the ode written by Pindar, that goes to the man who paid for the horses.
It feels like the ultimate power move. I am so rich and powerful, I can win the Olympics while sitting in the VIP box.
And that's exactly how they used it. Look at Alcibiades, the Athenian general, politician, and general bad boy of the 5th century BC. In 416 BC, he enters the Olympic chariot race. But he doesn't just enter one team.
The notes say he entered 7.
7 chariots in a single race. Now, think about the logistics of that.
Oh, my God.
He has to transport 7 chariots, at least 28 horses, plus reserves, trainers, grooms, and drivers, all the way from Athens to Olympia. The expense is astronomical.
And the result?
He took 1st, 2nd, and 4th place. He basically bought the podium.
So when he walked back into Athens, he wasn't just a general anymore, he was a god.
Exactly. He argued to the Athenian assembly that they should give him command of the military expedition to Sicily because he had won at Olympia. His logic was, look at my wealth. Look at my success. I bring glory to the city. The sport was a direct lever for political power.
But this rule about owners winning created a fascinating loophole. One of my favorite stories in this entire stack.
Yes.
Cynisca.
The Spartan princess. Yeah. This is a great moment in social history.
So, clarify the rules for women at the Olympics. It was a strict ban, right?
Incredibly strict.
Yeah.
Married women were forbidden from even entering the sanctuary of Olympia during the games. The penalty was death, supposedly being thrown off a nearby cliff.
Death.
Unmarried women could watch, but they certainly couldn't compete in the wrestling, boxing, or running.
But Cynisca was a Spartan, and Spartans, well, they play by different rules.
They do. And wealthy Spartan women had significant economic power. They could own land and property in their own right.
I see where this is going.
Cynisca realized that if the winner is the owner, and a woman can own horses, then a woman can win the Olympics.
So she breeds the horses, she hires the driver, she sends the team, and she wins.
She wins the 4-horse chariot race in 396 BC and again in 392 BC.
That is just... it's delicious. She hacked the system.
And she rubbed it in. We found the base of her victory statue at Olympia. The inscription is just. It's defiant. It reads, I, Cynisca, victorious with a chariot of swift-footed horses, erected this statue. I declare that I am the only woman in all of Greece to have won this crown.
I declare. She isn't hiding. She's challenging the entire male-dominated ecos of the games.
And interestingly, her brother, Agesilaus, the king of Sparta, allegedly encouraged her to do it. But his motivation might have been cynical.
How so?
Xenophon tells us that Agesilaus wanted to prove that chariot racing wasn't about manly virtue or skill, but just about having money.
So his thinking was, see, even a girl can do it.
Exactly. But Cynisca turned it around and made it a monument to her own agency.
I want to touch on one more thing about the Greek races before we move to Rome. The track itself, specifically the danger, because there's this one detail, the Taraxippus. That sounds like a ghost story.
The horse disturber. It's fascinating because it blends mythology and psychology.
So describe the setup.
The hippodrome at Olympia was long, about 780 meters, but near one of the turns there was a circular altar, and the legend was that as the horses approached this spot, they would be seized by a sudden irrational panic. They would shy, bolt, or crash.
And the Greeks blamed ghosts.
They had a dozen explanations. It was the ghost of a dead hero named Olennius, It was a trick by Poseidon. It was the spirit of some ancient charioteer who was angry. Charioteers would actually offer sacrifices to this altar before the race to appease the ghost.
But looking at it with a modern lens, what was actually happening? Why that specific spot?
It's likely a combination of optics and herd psychology. Some modern researchers suggest that the angle of the sun at the time of the races might have cast a shadow or created a glare off the altar that looked, to a horse, like a solid barrier or a hole.
And horses are prey animals. If they see something weird, they don't investigate, they bolt.
Exactly. This is the optical looming effect. If the lead horse on the inside thinks the wall is moving, it flinches to the right. It slams into the horse next to it.
Oh, what?
That kinetic energy travels down the yoke. In a split second, the chariot loses stability. And because you have 12 other chariots thundering behind you, one flinch becomes a 20-horse pileup.
So the ghost was actually just bad track design and equine instinct.
Which is arguably scarier. You can't negotiate with a shadow.
Okay, let's travel west. Let's go to Rome. Because if Greece was the amateur era, even with Alcibiades, Rome is the industrial revolution of racing.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Rome took this sport and scaled it up to an industrial level.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about individual aristocrats anymore. We're talking about the factions.
The factions, the reds, whites, blues, and greens.
Right. And I think we need to be careful with the word team here. When we say the green team, it sounds like the New York Jets, but these were much more than that.
So what were they?
They were massive corporate syndicates.
Vertical integration.
Completely. Think about the supply chain. To run the Circus Maximus, you need hundreds of top-tier horses every week. The factions owned massive stud farms in North Africa, in Spain, in Cappadocia.
Wow.
They had scouts constantly traveling the empire looking for breeding stock. They owned the ships to transport them. They owned the land to graze them.
And the grain. We always say bread in circuses, but the circuses ate the bread.
A racehorse in high training consumes a massive amount of high-quality barley. The Green faction wasn't just racing. They were a major player in the agricultural commodities market of Rome. They employed thousands of people. Not just drivers, but vets, grooms, wheelwrights, saddlers, architects.
So when you rooted for the Greens, you weren't just rooting for a color, you might be rooting for your employer.
Or your political patron. The emperors eventually had to take control of the factions because they were becoming too powerful as independent entities. They were effectively too big to fail, banks that also had private armies of fans.
Let's talk about the drivers in Rome. Because the status of a driver orga is one of the weirdest paradoxes in history.
It's the concept of infamies. Legally, in Roman law, if you were a charioteer, you belonged to the same social category as prostitutes, actors, and gladiators. You were infamous.
Infamous.
You had no reputation to lose. You couldn't testify in court. You couldn't hold public office. You were, legally speaking, a non-person.
You were also the most famous person in the world.
The contradiction is mind-blowing. These men were idols. They walked down the street and people fainted. Poets wrote epigrams about them. Emperors invited them to dinner. And the money is where it gets truly insane.
We have to deep dive on Gaius Appuleius Diocles, the GOAT.
The analytics on Diocles are better preserved than most emperors' reigns. We have a monument that lists his stats in excruciating detail. He is a Spaniard. He started racing at 18. He raced for 24 years.
Which is a miracle. Most drivers died in their 20s.
Survival was the first skill. Diocles started 4,257 races. He won 1,462.
That's a roughly 34% win rate.
Which is dominant over a 24-year career. But the number that stops you in your tracks is his lifetime earnings. The inscription says he won 35,863,120 sesterces.
35 million sesterces. I feel like we hear million today and think, okay, he's a rich tech guy. But what did 35 million mean in Rome?
Let's contextualize it. A Roman soldier, a legionary, earned about 900 sesterces a year.
Okay.
So Diocles earned the equivalent of 40,000 years of a soldier's salary. A wealthy senator, someone at the absolute top of the social pyramid, might have a net worth of 5 or 10 million sesterces. Diocles had 35 million in cash winnings.
So this guy who's legally scum could buy and sell the Senate.
There was a study by a classicist named Peter Struck. He tried to convert that wealth into modern purchasing power based on the cost of grain and basic goods. He estimated that Diocles' wealth would be around $15 billion today.
15 billion.
That puts him above Michael Jordan, above Tiger Woods, above Cristiano Ronaldo. He is likely the highest paid athlete in human history.
And he probably started as a slave.
Almost certainly. He would have bought his freedom early on with his first big winnings. But even as a freedman, he carried that stain of being infames. It must have been a strange psychological existence to be wealthier than the emperor's advisors, but to know that technically you are trash.
To earn that money, though, you had to survive the Roman style of racing. And this is where the tech comes in again, because the Roman chariot wasn't like the Greek one. It was designed for violence.
The Greek driver stood in a chariot and held the reins in their hands. If they crashed, they just let go.
Seems sensible.
The Romans looked at that and said, no, we need more torque. They wanted to steer the horses with their entire body weight.
So what do?
They wrapped the reins around their waists. They wore a leather corset, and they tied the leather reins from 4 horses tight against their torso.
That sounds like a death sentence.
It gave them incredible control. They could lean back and haul a team around a tight turn using their mass, leaving their hands free to whip the horses, or, and this is key, whip the other drivers.
But if the chariot flips?
If you have a naufragé, a shipwreck, you are anchored to 4 panicked animals weighing 1,000 pounds each. You are going to be dragged until there's nothing left of you.
Unless you have a knife.
The Falks. Every driver carried a small, curved knife, razor sharp, tucked into the bands of their corset. In the split second of a crash, when the world is spinning, the dust is blinding you, and the wood is splintering, you have to find that knife and cut the reins before the slack runs out.
It turns every crash into a horror movie survival scenario.
And remember, causing crashes was part of the game. The Romans didn't have lanes like modern track.
Yeah.
You could squeeze a rival into the spina, the central barrier. You could cut across their nose.
It was combat.
It was combat at 40 miles per hour.
And if skill and violence were enough, they used magic. I was looking at the archaeology notes, and the sheer volume of curse tablets found at racetracks is disturbing.
It is. These are thin sheets of lead inscribed with spells, rolled up and pierced with a nail. They would bury them at the starting gates or near the turning posts.
What did they say?
They're incredibly specific and vicious. One reads, I invoke you, spirit of the premature dead, to bind the legs of the horses of the green faction, blind their eyes, twist their souls, and as for the driver, Felix, break his hands, break his spine, crush his breath.
Crush his breath. That is pure malice.
And this wasn't just idle wishing. People paid sorcerers good money for these. They risked execution, because witchcraft was a capital offense, to bury these things. It shows that for the fans and the factions, this wasn't a game. It was a war.
It's amazing that they thought, I could invest in better training, or I could summon a demon to break Felix's spine.
The psychology of the gambler. You want certainty. And if the gods of the underworld can give you an edge, you take it.
So Rome dominates for centuries, but eventually the Western Empire collapses. The center of gravity shifts east to Constantinople, to the Byzantine Empire.
The new Rome. And you would think with the rise of Christianity, the sport might soften. The church fathers hated the circus. They called it a den of sin. But they couldn't stop it.
If anything, it seems like it got more intense in Byzantium.
It got more distilled. In Rome, you had 4 colors. In Constantinople, the reds and whites faded away. It became a binary system.
Just the blues versus the greens.
Right. And the Hippodrome in Constantinople wasn't just a stadium. It was attached to the palace.
Physically attached.
Yes. The Kathisma, the emperor's royal box, had a private spiral staircase leading directly into the imperial palace. The emperor would appear in the box like a god manifesting to his people. The Hippodrome was the only place where the common people could see the emperor and shout at him.
Shout him.
Yes, it was a political forum. Between races, the crowd would chant demands, lower taxes, or fire this corrupt official.
Yeah.
And the emperor had to listen, or at least pretend to.
But the racing itself, there's a specific format in the Byzantine era that I think proves just how skilled these guys were, the diversium.
Ah, the diversium. This is my favorite technical detail. It solves the eternal argument. Is it the car or the driver? Is it the horse or the man?
So how did it work?
Let's say a famous blue driver beats a famous green driver. The green fans might say, oh, you only won because you have better horses. So they would challenge him to a diversium.
And they would swap chariots.
They would literally trade teams. The winner takes the loser's slow horses. The loser takes the winner's fast horses. And they race again.
That is the ultimate flex, to beat you in my car and then beat you in your car.
If you won the diversium, you were untouchable. You had proven that your skill was the variable that mattered. It silenced the critics instantly.
But the fans in Byzantium weren't just arguing about skill. They were organized militias.
This is where the story turns dark. The blues and greens in Constantinople were more than sports fans. They were gangs. They controlled neighborhoods. They ran protection rackets. and they had religious and political ideologies.
Right. The blues were generally more orthodox and upper class, and the greens were more monophysite and lower class.
Broadly, yes, though it's complicated. But the point is, your color allegiance signaled your theology and your politics. Street fights between blues and greens were common. People were murdered in the stands.
Which leads us to 532 AD, the Nika riots.
The moment where the sport nearly destroyed the empire.
Walk us through the spark.
It started as a botched execution. The city prefect arrested some blues and greens for rioting. They were sentenced to hang. But the scaffold broke, and 2 men, 1 blue, 1 green, survived. The monks rescued them and hid them in a church.
And the fans demanded their pardon.
At the next race, the crowd started chanting to Emperor Justinian. Usually the blues and greens shouted at each other, but this time they turned and shouted at the emperor. They started chanting Nika, Nika, which means conquer or win.
The chant they usually use for the horses.
Exactly, but now they were using it against the state. The mob poured out of the Hippodrome. They set fire to the city. They burned down the original Hagia Sophia. They besieged the palace for days.
And they weren't just rioting. They found a nephew of a former emperor and tried to crown him. This was a coup.
It was a revolution born in a stadium. Justinian was terrified. He was actually packing the ships to flee Constantinople. He was going to abdicate.
And this is where Theodora comes in.
Empress Theodora, one of the most formidable women in history. She had grown up in the Hippodrome. Her father was a bear keeper for the Green faction. She knew these people, and she stood up in the council and shamed Justinian.
What did she say?
She said, "May I never be deprived of this purple robe, and may I never see the day when those who meet me do not call me empress." And she delivered the famous line, "Royal purple is the noblest shroud."
Meaning, I would rather die an empress than live as a refugee.
It steeled Justinian's spine. He decided to fight. He had 2 brilliant generals, Belisarius and Mundus. He sent them to the Hippodrome.
The rioters were still there.
They were packed in, crowning their new emperor. Belisarius blocked the exits with his troops, and then he gave the order.
It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre.
It was an extermination. The sources say 30,000 citizens were slaughtered in the stands. The floor of the Hippodrome was a lake of blood.
30,000 people. That's the population of a small city wiped out in an afternoon. Because of a sports riot.
It broke the power of the factions for a generation. The races continued. Justinian rebuilt the Hagia Sophia to be even bigger, but the political threat was neutralized. It is a sobering reminder of what happens when tribalism and fanaticism go unchecked.
Eventually, though, the sport did die out. It wasn't the riots that killed it, it was the money.
The economics just didn't work anymore. As the Byzantine Empire lost territory to the Persians and then the Arabs, they lost the grain of Egypt. They lost the stud farms of Syria.
The supply chain broke.
Exactly. You can't run a Formula One circuit if you can't buy gas or tires. The emperors couldn't afford the subsidies. The races became fewer, the horses slower.
The last recorded race in Rome was in 549 AD, sponsored by the Ostrogoth king Totila, and in Constantinople, it faded by the 12th century.
And then, the final insult. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople. The Crusaders stripped the Hippodrome. They took the 4 magnificent bronze horses that had stood over the starting gates for centuries.
And they took them to Venice.
Where they still are today. If you go to St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, those bronze horses on the facade, those are the ghosts of the Hippodrome. They watched the Nika riots. They watched the triumphs of the drivers.
Wow. So let's bring this all together. We've gone from the funeral games of the Iliad through the corporate machine of Rome to the bloody politics of Byzantium. What is the big takeaway here? Why does this matter to a modern listener?
I think it matters because it holds a mirror up to our own obsessions. We like to think we are civilized and rational. But look at us. We build billion-dollar stadiums. We pay athletes GDP-level salaries. We tribalize around colors and mascots.
And we crave the danger. We might not admit it, but part of the appeal of F1 or UFC is the risk, the knowledge that it's real.
And the concept of infamies. I can't shake that one.
That's the thought I want to leave you with, the paradox. In Rome, you could be the most loved person in the empire and yet be considered less than a citizen.
Do we have that today? Think about reality TV stars. Think about influencers who do dangerous stunts for clicks. Think about combat sports athletes.
We watch them, we fund their lifestyles, we obsess over their drama, but do we respect them? Or do we secretly feel superior to them? Are they our modern infamous performing monkeys for our amusement?
Are you not entertained?
Exactly. Exactly. It seems human nature hasn't changed in 2,000 years. We just swapped the chariots for algorithms and
And
cameras.
we probably drive a little safer.
Hopefully. Listen, thank you for diving into this with me. This was a wild ride.
Always a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for being part of the deep dive. We'll see you next time. Stay safe out there.